Hello, you're welcome to another session of our online learning. We are continuing our discussion on citizenship and human rights, and that is for social studies for JHS 1. Social studies for JHS 1. We are continuing our discussion on citizenship and human rights, and today we are looking at human rights abuse or human rights abuses. I am expectant that by the end of this lesson, the students will be able to explain the meaning of human rights abuse and will be able to identify groups that suffer abuses in Ghana the most. And also, we'll be able to explain ways by which human rights are abused in Ghana or forms of human rights abuses. Then, finally, the child will be able to identify ways by which human rights abuses can be prevented. Pay attention as we move on. Human rights abuse. Meaning of human rights abuse. So, human rights abuse is the infringements on the rights and freedoms of an individual or a group. So, when people's rights are abused, we say that we have infringed on their right. It means that they have been denied their rights. Their rights have been taken from them forcefully. Their rights have been denied them. So when people's rights are denied, we say that their rights have been abused. So for example, you have the right to move around or the right to freedom of movement. And so if you are forcefully kept hostage, then we say that your rights have been abused because your right to move has been denied, or you have been denied your rights to movement. Okay. The human rights of an individual or the entire state can be abused deliberately or unknowingly. So intentionally, the human rights, the rights that the freedom, the privileges that we have as individuals and as a nation can be abused. The rights of the whole nation can be abused. The same way the rights of an individual can be abused. No matter how many you are or what group you belong to, sometimes you may suffer human rights abuse because of many different reasons. When one's rights is denied illegally, then that person's right is being abused. So the word here is illegally or illegally. So it means that when your rights are denied without a legal base, then it means you have suffered human rights abuse. So the word is legal. It means that one's rights can be denied lawfully. For example, if you have the freedom of liberty, or the right to liberty, or the right to freedom of movement, and then you involve yourself in a criminal act or unlawful behavior, your right to freedom of movement may be denied you by keeping you in prison, where you can't move around, you can't go around your normal duties. Excuse me. For that one, it is legal, so it is not an abuse of your right. So the word is illegally. So when one's right is denied illegally, then that person's right is being abused. Let's look at groups that suffer human rights abuses. Groups that suffer human rights abuses. Excuse me, let me correct this quickly. So the word is groups. Groups that suffer human rights abuses. Thank you. So groups that suffer human rights abuses in Ghana include children. Children suffer a lot of abuses, usually because they do not know their right, or sometimes because of our Ghanaian culture. Then girl child. Girl child also suffer a lot of abuses. Sometimes they are denied their right to education, rape, defilement, and all that. Then women also suffer a lot of human rights abuses. Women, persons with disabilities is also another group that suffer human rights abuses. Then the poor and marginalized in society, their rights are abused on daily basis. And sometimes foreigners also suffer human rights abuses. Refugees are another group of people who suffer human rights abuses. And then minority groups. Minority groups also suffer human rights abuses. And persons in conflict areas. These groups of persons or these groups of people suffer human rights abuses than any other group. If there is any that I have not added, you can add it to your notes. Let's move on. Now, ways by which human rights are abused in Ghana. All these groups you have mentioned suffer different forms of human rights abuses. And some of these forms of abuses they suffer are domestic slavery. Domestic slavery is very common among children, and especially the girl child. Children suffer a lot of abuse in the form of domestic slavery. They are made to work tirelessly and sometimes given little or no food. Slavery is no longer in existence in modern democracy of Ghana, but domestic slavery has been on the rise for some time. People give their children to others to stay with because of poverty and other reasons, and these children become domestic slaves that are used for very tedious jobs all day. Then child labor is another. Also mainly because of poverty, a lot of children who are underage are used in labor. When they go to our market centers, when they sit in our public transports, the conductors, some are underage. That is child labor. That child is supposed to be in school and not to be working. That child is not supposed to fend for himself. That child is supposed to be taken care of by their parent. So all that is part of human rights abuse. Then sex trade. Sex trade is another. A lot of girls are involved in sex trade. They have campaigns and gurus that take some of these children, usually either they have been kidnapped or they have been trafficked, into the city centers and use them for sex business. They sleep with older men and their bosses or their mistresses take money from these people and they are paid something little, which is very bad. Discrimination is another form of human rights abuse. Discrimination occurs in everyday life activities. People discriminate on tribal basis, on religious lines, on political lines, and so on. Discrimination is very bad. Every human being is human enough to deserve all forms of treatment you give to any other person. And so when people discriminate because of social class or because of ailment or because of poverty or because of ethnicity or religion, it is very bad. It is abuse on the person's right. Stigmatization against disabled. The disabled, that is the blind, the lame, the deaf and dumb and so on, suffer a lot of discrimination or stigmatization in society. It is very bad. It is part of human rights abuse. Another form of human rights abuse is depriving medical care to the sick. Bullying is also a form of human rights abuse, and this is very common among students. So if you are a bully, I advise you to stop because it is not right. You are abusing the person's right by bullying them, and it is illegal. I hope that is clear. Rape is another form of human rights abuse. Child trafficking. People sell their children to these traffickers at very cheap prices, and these children are taken to faraway places and used for all sort of menial jobs. They are involved in very risky activities that endanger their lives. Child trafficking is another form of human rights abuse. Then kidnapping. Kidnapping was on the rise some time back last year. There have been issues of the three Takrady girls. There have been issues of some foreigners in Kumasi and so on. Kidnapping is also a form of human rights abuse. All right. Let's look at reasons why human rights abuses occur. Many people suffer human rights abuses on a daily basis because of many different reasons. And some of these reasons are illiteracy. Some people's rights are abused because they are illiterate. They don't know anything about rights. They can't read and write. They don't know anything, and so the people who are literate sometimes take advantage of them and abuse their rights. Other people's rights are abused because of poverty, because they don't even have money to hire a legal assistant or a lawyer to defend their cases for them. And so, due to poverty, the people with a little money or the rich ones in society take advantage of the poor. Sometimes they take their properties from them forcefully and they can't do anything. Then fear. Fear is another reason why people's rights are abused. Sometimes when people's rights are abused, they fear to report their abusers or the people who abuse their rights. And this is very, very bad. When your rights are abused, I advise that you report the person who did that to you. Do not be afraid. Report to the nearest police station, report to your parents, report to your church leaders, and so on. These people may help you to fight for your rights. And so do not be afraid. Then apathy. Apathy. Apathy is another reason why people's rights are abused on a daily basis. When people abuse others' rights because of apathy, the Ghanaian attitude of apathy, Enyashe, it's not anything. It's okay. Just let it be. Allow him to go. Don't mind. Never mind. It won't happen again. And this has encouraged people to continue doing it. But when we stop the apathy and then report those who abuse people's rights, it will serve as a deterrent to others so that other people don't engage in such activities. Then lack of political representation. Some communities have their rights abused because they lack political representation in parliament and in other political decision-making arenas. Then greed or lack of sympathy. Greed or lack of sympathy. Sometimes people's rights are abused, and the very people who are supposed to ensure that people's rights are protected, because of greed and lack of sympathy, they engage in bribery and corrupt activities and overlook all these human rights abuses. And this is encouraging and promoting the rise of human rights abuse in our societies. Greed and lack of sympathy is another reason why human rights abuses occur. Then ignorance. Sometimes people are even ignorant of their rights. They don't even know anything about their rights because they are not educated about their rights or they don't have any knowledge of their rights. Even when their rights are being abused, they are not aware. You see? So ignorance is another reason why human rights abuses occur. Then, how to prevent human rights abuses in Ghana? To prevent human rights abuse, we should ensure that our constitutional checks on the states are working. State institutions have constitutional guidelines within which they work. And if the constitutional checks are not working, some state institutions may become too powerful and may abuse the rights of individuals, communities, or the state at large. If these checks are not ensured, dictatorship and tyranny may rise up, and this will result in a lot of human rights abuses. So to prevent human rights abuse, we should ensure constitutional checks on state institutions. An active role of the court in administration of justice. Yes, when your rights are abused, the best place you can seek justice is the court. And so if the court is very active and up on their game when it comes to issues involving human rights abuse, everybody will be on their guard, knowing that when you abuse anybody's rights and you are taken to court, the court will deal with you according to the law. But when the court is not playing its role, when the court is compromised, when the court is not working as it should, then human rights abuses will continue. So to prevent human rights abuse, the court must play an active role in the administration of justice. Then practicing democracy. Dictatorship is a situation that allows a lot of human rights abuse. In the military regimes in the past, when military leaders led this country, Ghana, there have been so many stories of human rights abuses, killing, imprisonment, and all sort of brutalities against the citizens. But when we started practicing democracy in the Fourth Republic, these things have come down by far. And so practicing democracy can help to prevent human rights abuse in Ghana. Then, state institutions like Commission on Human Rights and Administrative Justice, CHRAJ, is there to ensure that the civil servant and then other state agencies, ministries and departments will do the right thing when it comes to human rights protection. And so when the CHRAJ performs its role actively, it will also help to reduce human rights abuses in Ghana. Then finally, the role of other human rights protection institutions, agencies, NGOs, human rights activists, and so on, can also help to prevent human rights abuse. Then finally, let's tolerate one another. As individuals, we should also learn to love one another, respect all people equally, and not abuse the rights of others. Then we can help to reduce or prevent human rights abuses in Ghana. You also have a role to play. You, as a student, you have a role to play. Respect the rights of other people and protect the rights of your friends, families, and others in society. This will help to prevent human rights abuses in Ghana. I hope you have learned a lot today. Yes, you have learned a lot. And to test your knowledge on what you have learned, you answer the following questions. Define human rights abuse. Mention 4 groups. The word is for, not flower. Mention 4 groups that suffer human rights abuses in Ghana. Then highlight 2 ways by which we can prevent human rights abuses in Ghana. All right. I'm sorry for this. Let me do this correction quickly. So the word here is for, not flower. Okay? Good. All right. This brings us to the end of today's lesson. I wish you good luck. Stay safe and keep learning. Bye-bye.